Hey there, and welcome to That Bond Show, a That Nerdy Site show and the internet's #1 James Bond rewatch show, hosted by two guys named Logan and Trevor. Probably. Each week, we'll review a new James Bond film from Dr. No to No Time to Die. I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson, and joining me, as always, is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Bless your heart.
Bless your heart, indeed. We are doing License to Kill, the 16th James Bond film this week, and the second and final of the Timothy Dalton era. This was released on June 13th of 1989, the last summer James Bond film, as we'll get to here in a little bit in the trivia section. Trevor, this is really the last James Bond film you won't have any sort of memory associated with, right? You were 4 when this came out.
Yeah.
You made it. You made it through the Baron, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton stretch of having no association at all.
Yeah, I mean, I had barely any association with the Connery as well. So.
Largely through Austin Powers. Yeah.
So yeah, this is the last, like, in the no man's land of I don't know what to expect, because even though, like, I've seen all the Pierce Brosnan ones, and even though I haven't seen all of the Daniel Craig ones, I've obviously been around for the film junkets and kind of responses to all of those movies. So yeah, this was the last, like, complete mystery for me.
Yeah. Yes, we are doing License to Kill. Running through the cast and crew here. We have got Timothy Dalton back as James Bond, like I mentioned a minute ago, in his second and final appearance. He's one of only 2 Bonds to only get 2 or fewer cracks at the bat, which is a real shame. We've got Carrie Lowell as Pam Bouvier, Robert Davi as Fran Sanchez, who, in a little fun fact, I didn't include in the trivia because it's just a throwaway thing, but I know how much Trevor loves this style of acting, so I just wanted to make a point of it. Robert Davi was a method actor, and so off the set, he was still the same person.
Yeah, I saw that trivia and I was like, damn it, because I like the performance a lot, but I read that and I was like, why do you do that? Like,
he at least feels like this is like a more chill method acting thing than to be someone like the Joker, right? Where you're just completely nuts. Because, like, Fran Sanchez at least can be, like, fun and, like, a regular person sometimes.
Yeah, and like, I imagine it was, like, method to a degree. Like, he's not obviously he's not out there being a real drug lord or really trying to kill people or anything like that.
He's not Walter White on the side. Yeah,
he's just like, I'm going to stay in character. I'm going to stay in the accent and the dialect or whatever, and you know, keep Timothy Dalton at arm's length or whatever that nonsense was. And even that, like, he probably didn't even have to do, like, I guess depending on much, like where they were, because
where they were,
like
in the film,
they got to be, you know, buddy chummy for parts of the movie. So
yeah. We have got a very, very young Benicio del Toro as Daario.
That was a fun surprise. I did not expect seeing that. Like, I saw his name pop up in the credits. I was like, oh, okay, neat. And then he pops up. I'm like, oh, he is really, really young here.
Yeah. It is one of my favorite things about License to Kill. Is that, like, Benicio del Toro obviously has become a huge star in the last 3 decades since this movie came out. But I always have him pegged as, like, that is Daario from License to Kill. You look at him go, and then it's like, oh, this is, like, actually look at him go. He is doing very well for himself here.
Yeah, he's like one of the few Oscar-winning people who have been in Bond.
Yeah. Joining a very short list. We've got David Headerson returning as Felix Leiter, one of only 2 who will reprise the character.
If you hadn't told me that, I would not have realized that was the same guy from whatever it was, Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die, a 16-year difference here. And again, another little fun piece of trivia is that John Glenn originally didn't want to cast David Headerson because he thought he was too old for the action pieces in the film, and we'll get into that a little bit more in another trivia section, but maybe he wasn't entirely wrong. We've got Talisa Soto as Lupe, Anthony Zerbe as Milton Crest, Frank McRae as Sharkey, Priscilla Barnes as Della, Desmond Llewellyn, and a very beefed up role for him as Q, Caroline Bliss, and a very blink and you miss it performance as Moneypenny, Wayne Newton as Professor Joe Butcher, and Robert Brown as M in his final appearance as
I want
well.
to give a shout out to Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa as Quang. probably
Yeah,
best known
Mortal
as
Kombat.
Shang Tsung,
Yeah.
and Talisa Soto is Katana in Mortal Kombat. So this was like
Oh, wow,
funny
definitely
seeing
wouldn't have picked that one.
them,
Okay.
like knowing them from
Together.
my like iconic
Yeah.
childhood memory of Mortal Kombat, seeing both of them pop up in in this, being like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's really fun. And then this is the 5th and final film in the series, directed by John Glenn. He would, with this film, set the record for the most films directed by a single director, with 5, taking it past Guy Hamilton. In the Blast from the Past section, we've got a new president, finally. George H.W. Bush is now the president of the U.S. Over in the UK, though, you're still stuck with Margaret Thatcher, who is now the PM for a record 6 Bond film under her watch. In the Trevor watch section, Trevor was 4 years old, and this would be the last Bond film released before I was born. So we're kind of jumping a few different kind of era shifts here with this from Goldeneye. And of course, 1989 was a banner year for films. But the highest grossing movie of the year and one of the highest grossing movies ever upon its release was Batman, the 1989 version, directed by Tim Burton and starring Michael Keaton.
Before we dive into the trivia, I had a question. Since it was more tied to the casting stuff, but you mentioned the Blink and You Miss It Moneypenny performance. Is this the first and potentially only movie where Moneypenny and Bond don't actually
have
interact?
A scene.
Like,
That's
I know there was one of those with like Lois, like the last
Diamonds Are
Connery
Forever.
one or whatever, where like
Diamonds Are
they
Forever.
didn't actually act opposite
But
one
there's
another,
a
but they
scene
still
of
have a
them,
scene
yeah.
together. Yeah.
That's an excellent question. That's a really good question, Trevor, actually. I would say yes. I can't think of another time because, like, you know, they definitely have seen together in all the Pierce Brosnan ones because him and Samantha Bond have really good chemistry, I think. And then Moneypenny's obviously not in, spoiler alert, the first 2 Daniel Craig movies.
Mm-hmm.
But then him and Naomi Harris definitely have a scene together in every movie. So yeah, that's a great little trivia fact. Yeah, because this is definitely the only one that they would not have a scene together in.
Yeah, because also one of the few where Bond never shows up at MI6.
Bond's
Like,
never even in England.
He's never even in England for this one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the only ones. Again, that will be a trivia fact, but this is the only movie in the series not filmed even a little bit at Pinewood Studios in the UK. So yeah, that's a great little fun trivia fact I brought up, Trevor. Yes, but speaking of the trivia, License to Kill would prove to be a major turning point for the Bond series. The film would gross $156 million worldwide, which sounds nice enough. And would have it settle as the 12th biggest film for the year. Less nice if you're the Broccoli family. A disappointment for the series. It was its US numbers in particular, though, that would see it labeled as a box office bomb, with the film taking in $34.6 million at the US box office, the lowest total ever when adjusted for inflation. The low box office gross of the film has been attributed to a variety of reasons, from License to Kill's darker tone to a truly terrible marketing strategy, mainly in the US. It is weird, some of the like trailers and marketing push they did for the film, to what I think is probably the most likely scenario, the overstuffed summer blockbuster season that year, with Batman 89, Lethal Weapon 2, Ghostbusters 2, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade all coming out during the same summer season. The box office disappointment of the movie would see it become the last Bond movie ever released in the summer, a trend that has continued to this day.
It'd be very interesting because I feel like modern Daniel Craig Bond would have probably performed fine in the summer if it found like a window in between superhero movies or something like that. Like it's obviously summer blockbuster stuff, but I would argue that modern Bond is blockbuster, and last one, No Time to Die in particular, was like one of the highest grossing movies of last year. You know, pandemic figures kind of being a huge role and factor in that and stuff. But like, I feel like it's an interesting strategy to keep it out of there. But like in the same way, like Star Wars would probably be fine in the summer, but they release it, you know, around the holidays to really goose the numbers there, I imagine. So maybe Bond benefited from a similar strategy.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think we'll get to it next week, obviously, but the release and, you know, rollout of Goldeneye was such a massive success. It can't be kind of underrated. Like Goldeneye was just obliterated the Bond box office records when you don't adjust for inflation. Even adjusted for inflation, it was still one of the biggest ever for the series. That I think they were like, well, that worked pretty well. And then all of the other Pierce Brosnan movies, whether they were critically well received or not, were all super successful at the box office. That I think it just became like, this is when we do it now. And I think the face of a summer blockbuster movie just changed so much to like not a Bond movie necessarily. That, yeah, to your point, like we've kind of come a little bit full circle where I think a Bond movie would do really well in the summer kind of blockbuster season. But I think from, Eon Productions' point of view, it's like, well, why bother, right? Like Skyfall grossed $1 billion in November, right? And No Time to Die grossed like $700 million. So it's like, well, we're doing pretty good, not in the summer. Yeah, it's a great question though. Leading on from the box office bomb of the movie, the messy aftermath and disappointment of License to Kill, in addition to the subsequent years-long wrangling over the ownership of the James Bond character, would lead to this movie being called a bloodless coup for the series, with a number of longtime Bond members leaving, starting with longtime director John Glenn being fired or stepping away from the series, again, depending on how you want to take someone's word for it or not. After 5 movies, writer of 13 Bond films, Richard Maibaum passing away in 1991, title designer Maurice Binder leaving the series, and this being the final Bond film in the series for Caroline Bliss, granted she only had 2, yeah. Robert Brown as M, and Timothy Dalton as James Bond. Finally, this would also be the final Bond film overseen by longtime Bond producer Albert R. Broccoli, and indeed, he would only be able to be on set briefly before the climate and thin air of Mexico City forced him to return home. After this, the series would be taken over by Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli. Spoiler alert, they're going to update it a fucking ton come the next movie. No more casting beautiful people who can't act.
There was,
as for this
I wouldn't necessarily say this was a beautiful people who can't act thing, but there was a lot of like very weird like audio dubbing in like the first few chunks of the movie, in particular around like Killifer or whatever it was. I was like, what is going on here, man? Like, what you are not anywhere close to your lip sync.
It's not, it's synced up together at all. This is a weird movie. We'll get into that, but yeah, I'm also glad you brought that up. As for this being Dalton's final Bond film, there are a lot of reports that this was due to the lackluster reception of the film upon release, but that's not true. The far bigger culprit was the years-long gap in between films and the long legal drama that kind of ensued over the series. Indeed, Dalton was originally slated to appear in a third Bond film called Property of a Lady that was set to start shooting in May of 1990, before the above-mentioned legal drama delayed production indefinitely. Dalton would officially announce his retirement from the role in 1994 while on set of another movie. Dalton himself admitted as recently as 2018 that after not originally wanting to do another Bond film, he'd finally decided to return for a third and final one, but Albert Broccoli told him that after a 5-year gap, it wouldn't be possible to do just one. Dalton then quit, saying he had no intention of playing Bond for the rest of his life. So Albert R. Broccoli, yet again, using his influence for all kinds of shenanigans. At 21 years old, Benicio del Toro is the youngest actor to ever play a Bond villain. Again, he's so young in this movie. Mm-hmm. During one of the takes of Bond and Felix jumping out of the plane, a malfunction caused David Headerson to fall on the pavement. The injury left him with a limp for the rest of filming. This is the first Bond film in the series to achieve a PG-13 rating. This is also the first Ion-produced Bond film not to take its name either from an Ian Fleming novel or short story. And finally, this is the first film in the series, like I alluded to earlier, not to have any part of it filmed at Pinewood Studios in the UK.
I also, just as a I can already see it coming kind of thing when I have to go in and edit your doc, they don't spell it license with an S, they spell it license with a C, doing the weird British spelling of it.
How did I spell it?
You have it spelled license License, but License to Kill is Licence. So
Oh.
that's going to be something that I'm going to basically just do a find and replace in in your
Yeah.
review doc, I'm sure.
Silly British people.
And also, like, because when I went and searched for it on IMDb, I did the same thing, and I was like, why is this like the last entry on this list? Oh, it's because they spelled it differently. They went with
You're
the,
right.
like,
I'm looking at it right now in the Bond book. You're right. I literally. That's a great trivia poll. 30 years, never noticed it until right now that it's not spelled correctly.
Yeah.
For American English. Great. Next up, we've got the 0072nd recap. This is going to be the longest one ever.
Yeah, looks like it's going to be.
I timed it.
Okay.
It was just short of 100 seconds when I timed myself, so that's sort of where.
Okay, yeah, I'll go 95.
So let's go. James and Felix are on their way to Felix's wedding when they are stopped by the DEA with news that wanted drug kingpin Fran Sanchez has made his first appearance stateside in years. They make a quick detour, go plane fishing, and capture Sanchez before parachuting out of the plane and arriving just in time for Felix's wedding. Afterwards, Felix is betrayed by Kilfer, and Sanchez murders Felix's new bride, Della, and feeds lighter to sharks who take out one of his legs. Bond discovers the pair and vows revenge. He and Sharky visit a bunch of different Shark Tank owners before finding the one owned by Milton Crest. After discovering Kilfer and lots of drugs, the pair feed Kilfer to the sharks. Bond is confronted by Im on location, who tells him to drop the matter with no understanding before Bond refuses and has his license to kill revoked. Bond and Sharky go aboard Crest's ship, meet Lupe before Sharky is killed, and Bond disrupts a drug deal and bounces off with mega cash. Bond meets Pam and Daario, gets in a roadhouse fight, and then flies out to Sanchez's home turf. Afterwards, Bond reenacts the plot of The Punisher and works his way into Sanchez's organization before he turns Sanchez against his people one by one. Q comes out in the field and is a delight. The gang all go to Sanchez's main drug operation, meet Wayne Newton. Daario spots Bond from the bar fight. Shit goes sideways, Daario gets diced up, and a tanker chase ensues. Eventually, after hella explosions and fights, Sanchez is doused in oil and ready to kill Bond before James shows him the lighter Felix and Della gave him as a gift and lights Sanchez on fire. We end with Felix recovering in the hospital and Bond and Pam together in the pool.
103.
Okay. I'm happy with that. Trevor.
Yeah.
How many people were killed?
All right. This was I'm sure there's been like higher Bond to death ratios, but this felt on the high side because the total kill count in here comes in at 27 is what the final tally comes at. And 13 of those are from RN Commander James Bond / Agent 007 / non-Agent 007
Just James Bond.
Yeah. So how many of those were named characters?
He kills Sanchez. He kills Daario. He doesn't kill Milton Crest. Sanchez does. He doesn't kill...
That one was fucking gruesome.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll get into that. He doesn't kill the head of security. Sanchez does. He doesn't kill the like nerdy accountant. Sanchez does. Wayne Newton doesn't die. And then Kilfer. So I'm gonna say Bond kills 3 named characters.
3 named characters. So they get you on this one because a lot of Sanchez's henchmen have names.
Oh, do they? That's that bullshit. All right.
Yeah. So it's actually 6. Killifer. Yeah, you got Killifer, you got Daario, you got Sanchez. Clive is the guy that Bond shoots with the harpoon and says this is for Sharky. So that's one of Crest's guys, but is named as Clive. And then 2 of the henchmen in the tanker chase are named Braun and Perez, and they are basically like in the plane. Yeah, Bond opens a fuel valve on a tanker and pours the gasoline onto the road, causing Braun's truck to catch fire and Braun to drive off a cliff, killing himself and Perez. So the tire, the car that has like the flaming tires has 2 named henchmen on it. So yeah, it like I was looking at this one and I was like, Logan's definitely gonna call bullshit on this, but they're named in the credits.
I will totally. So I'm bringing up again the James Bond film guide book, which has like all the adversaries. I'll totally give you Perez and Braun because they're in the book, and yeah, like they're in it a lot, and they have a lot of scenes together with Sanchez and everything. Clive is a total bullshit name. That dude does not. His name is not said in this fucking movie. I'm definitely wrong, but like I'm totally content with Perez and Braun and being wrong. But Clive was like, all right, that dude who's in one scene to get shot with a harpoon. His name is Clive. Sure.
Yeah.
All right, there we go.
He is credited. He is credited as Clive in the film and like IMDb wise as well.
Because he knew someone probably.
Not in the just like more the here's all the uncredited people. He's up there in the credits.
So that takes me to 11 correct and 5 wrong in terms of how many killed. And with that, Trevor, what did you think of License to Kill?
This is another one I really enjoyed.
Okay.
I had a really good time with this one. I think a lot of that is I really like the villain. I really like Sanchez here. I like that it's another like just drug dealer trying to get as much money as possible. I love the absurdity of it, like Wayne Newton's character acting as basically so like weird. The front/code for these drug deals and all that stuff. Like I love that. The opening chunk of like everybody on the way to Felix's wedding is like just the right amount of absurd to be fun and not like what the hell's going on kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed like Crest is kind of like the a mini boss kind of thing. And I'm a sucker for the like revenge Count of Monte Cristo kind of thing of like I'm going to pretend to be somebody so that I can work my way into this organization and take everybody down one by one. And Bond does that masterfully in this one and is a ton of fun. Like I really enjoy Pam as like she immediately like I love that they set her up and they introduce her at the wedding but like don't make a thing of it until you get back to the bar fight scene and it's like, oh, now that's who she was, that's why she was there at the wedding, here's how she's going to come into play. She's immediately set up as competent, she's got the shotgun and basically it's like, that's cute, you with your little Walter PPK, that's cute, like this is the kind of hardware you need in this kind of environment. So she's a lot of fun. Again, like Daario, like seeing Benicio del Toro is fun, but then he's actually like a good, fun villain throughout the film. So that was a delight. And yeah, I like, and Q like getting a much more fun role to play in this.
It's time to shine,
as Uncle Q was a lot of fun. So yeah, this was just like a good, fun adventure. And while there are definitely elements that I didn't, or I feel could have been like fleshed out a little better. Like I again didn't really have like that's Felix from that movie 20 years ago or whatever. It was just like, okay, this is another Felix movie, and suddenly this version of Bond is close enough to him that they're being best man in a wedding that heretofore unmentioned kind of stuff. I think that all gets rushed really quickly, and there was definitely a moment there where like he gets thrown to the sharks, and I was like, oh, this is why they don't bring Felix back in the Goldeneye in the Pierce Brosnan era, because I was like, oh, they killed Felix off here. Okay, that makes sense. Then when it's like a hard reboot with the Daniel Craig, oh no, he's not really dead. He like it was just kind of a fake out. He just loses a leg here, and we'll kind of leave that in limbo for a while. Like I was like, that was a weird call. Like from a narrative perspective, from a villain perspective, like why leave him alive? What was the benefit of that? I liked the kind of surprise that there were other forces at play while Bond is on this like rogue vendetta mission, including like the Hong Kong like undercover task force, including Pam being there as like a CIA person to try and turn Heller. Like so everybody has like objectives that don't necessarily align with Bond's, and ends up causing some tension and friction. And so yeah, like there was just a lot of fun to this one. Um, and I'm sad that Timothy Dalton didn't do more.
Yeah, I think there is so much going on in License to Kill, and this is a movie that was not particularly like, it was received, I think, critically mixed when it came out.
Mm-hmm. It's
And it's
definitely
always kind of had,
like it's definitely a much more brutal like again,
yes,
the like watching Krisk's head
head
explode was like, oh, I was not expecting it to go there.
Yeah, I mean, even in the beginning, right, where you have like Felix get fed to sharks, right? His wife
Yeah.
get murdered. I mean, even like with Sanchez beats his girlfriend, right? And like that's all like the first
Yeah.
like 15 minutes of the movie,
Yeah.
right? To say nothing of like the movie ends with Bond literally burning alive the main villain of the film, right? Like it is a very dark, gritty kind of movie, and so tonally I can get people didn't like it. Except, I mean, I can only imagine what Roger Moore thought when he pulled this movie. If he didn't like Christopher Walken gunning down people in a mine, this one probably would have driven him insane. But like, I think I've always had like an affinity for this movie. I think maybe partially because like it is just so jarring and different than really any movie in the series. Maybe until we get to like some of the like Die Another Day does a little bit of this kind of stuff, but then like the Daniel Craig ones. But even Daniel Craig, like you could make the argument none of his movies get this dark. Maybe with the exception of Quantum of Solace is like pretty angry, ragey for the whole thing too. I also love, whenever films do like I'm gonna be your buddy and kind of turn everyone against you. Again, I referenced like the 2003 Punisher movie with John Travolta. It's a classic example of that to me, where like, yeah, he becomes his friend and just turns everyone against him one by one.
John Travolta was in the Punisher movie?
Yeah, the one from like 2003. He's the main bad guy, Kingpin. I don't know who it was. But it's great. And I think that, I really enjoy that element of this movie a lot. And I really enjoy what they do. One new thing that I'd never, I think, really appreciated until this viewing is, like you said, those kind of conflicting plans that Bond, through his actions, just kind of plowing through, right? Like he just destroys the Hong Kong like drug operation, and not through his actions, but sort of through his actions, like leads to all these people getting killed. He blows up Pam's thing and leads to Heller dying, right? Like he leads to a lot of like collateral damage here, because he's so laser focused on just taking on Sanchez.
Yeah, the Hong Kong one. Again, this is one I watched originally a couple nights ago, and then I was watching it again right before we started recording. I didn't get all the way through it in the second rewatch, but I did like get right up to the basically like everybody from the Hong Kong operation dying, and it's like realizing if they hadn't intervened, they wouldn't have gotten like necessary. I mean, they might have still gotten taken to the operation. Somebody might have tried to carry on in Sanchez's absence, but like they're the ones that keep Bond from killing Sanchez. So like they kind of lead to their own downfall in being ninjas and attacking Bond as he's trying to take Sanchez out.
Yeah, I did enjoy the like random British dude there. It's kind of just the thing of like, we're gonna take you in, like that, like you're just totally off the reservation. Even if him in this is like sort of off the deep end himself a little bit, I think, and like if they just had like either one, like Bond all out for not being like chill because like his best friend has just been like fucking tortured, and he's kind of been through the ringer. Him is just like totally raging for like no reason, and I always love how like angry Robert Brown is for like no apparent reason in this film, and like just can't take any sort of understanding. It always makes me laugh. And they do that, like, yeah, you get canned after this, and you get placed because everything went very badly. Or the fact that it's like shot in Ernest Hemingway's house.
That was also weird. And then the farewell to arms line,
But yeah, I mean, like, I like License to Kill. I think it is a ton of fun. I think it's interesting doing this rewatch and seeing the movies that, are kind of like the hits that I maybe always appreciated, but like really love now, right? Like what happened with Goldfinger, or what happened last week with Living Daylights, where like I really love those movies a lot more than I did before, or at least more than I did before. And the movies that don't fare as well, right? Like You Don't Live Twice, as we've talked about. And I think License to Kill is sort of like a middle ground option. There are parts that I like more than when I used to watch it. There are parts I like a little bit less. I will say that like I think watching them back to back like this, I like Living Daylight stronger. I think it's a like more cohesive, strong film all the way through. While License to Kill just has some truly epic moments to it. But yeah, I mean, let's in terms of like favorite stuff, like I think Pam is awesome, and one of my favorite things about Pam is how this is one of the first Bond movies where it feels like they sort of like directly kind of go at the fact that Bond is just sort of like a little bit of a misogynist, and sort of like a like without even meaning to be, right? Like he'll just like say stuff where like it's like, oh, like this is like a man's world, like this is kind of like how men do it, and like he doesn't even think about it, he just like operates that way. And I'm sure Timothy Dalton, with like how much he was into like the book part of Bond, also wanted to incorporate that into like this movie. And again, it's another reason why it's such a disappointment that we didn't get a third Timothy Dalton movie, to at least get like a trilogy of them out of him, because I think the thing for me after watching these two movies that I most of the takeaway of is just how good Timothy Dalton is as James Bond, and how much it sucks that we didn't get more of him. And it's unfortunate a little bit too, because like he is just sandwiched between two such like iconic performances of the character, right, with Roger Moore on one side and Pierce Brosnan on the other. But Timothy Dalton's two films are so good, and I think he is so good as Bond. Like in some ways, I think Timothy Dalton is like, he's like the reverse George Lazenby. Where like Lazenby's in like a good movie, but he's bad, and like Timothy Dalton is great. And Living Daylights is great, but like License to Kill is maybe like good. And like I'd have loved to have seen him hit like one more movie, because I feel like it's like the third film for a lot of Bond actors where like they really like nail it, with Daniel Craig in Skyfall, Connery in Goldfinger, Roger Moore in Spy Who Loved Me. So I'd have loved to have seen like one more from him and see what he could have done with like one last kind of turn at the character.
Yeah, I mean, like, yes, but I think so much of it is out of his control as well. Like,
oh yeah,
if the script for Property Lady sucked, like I wouldn't want that to be the note he goes out on. So like I like that he just kind of gets two high notes for his little limited run there.
It is,
especially because like
curious.
I would be like Property of a Lady or whatever just seems like, from the name alone, I don't think Bond movie. I think like British period
Romantic
piece
comedy,
or something like that. Like not even comedy, but like I think Downton Abbey-esque or something like that.
Emma,
yeah, something like that. I think 18th century, 19th century,
Jane
something
Austen,
like that.
yeah.
And so yeah, just like I would have been very curious what that kind of movie would have looked like. But yeah, I think especially like any number of things would have played out differently. Obviously, like the screenwriter passing away plays a major role in that, but like the screenwriter had like two good hits with Timothy Dalton, but like so many of his others very strong misses for me. So I think it's more likely it would have been a bad movie than a good movie. And they just were fortunate with him in that lightning struck twice. But yeah, I don't know if third time would have been the charm.
It'd have been interesting to see what a third Dalton movie would have been too, I think, from the angle of like where this movie leaves us, right? Where like the movie, I think, I mean, very deliberately does not end with like Bond back at MI6, like being reinstated. Like very much is just like him in this like Central American country in a pool, basically. And so it'd have been interesting to see like what they would have been to like reinstate him, or if they would have had it be more of like a like where like this movie sort of like inadvertently kind of ends in a very like definitive end for his character as well. That like how they would have tried to like retcon that a little bit to like make it an easier transition for the third one. I would have found it interesting, I think, too, if like how they would have like worked that out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't imagine they would have. Like, continuity hasn't really been a thing that the Bond series has ever really focused on, apart from like a few lines here and there when they want to like reinforce that, oh, this is actually the same Bond as, you know, those others.
He's been married before a long time ago. Yeah.
Again, this one starts with a wedding we didn't know was going to happen. It starts with a like reunion with Felix we didn't know was going to be, you know, a thing. So I feel like the next movie would have just been Bond back in England, and
MI6.
no mention would have been made of it. I mean, similarly, like obviously Goldeneye is going to start with like a flashback to, you know, an earlier age or whatever, but like they don't really make, at least I don't remember them making any point of bringing Bond back from that job in the Bahamas or whatever. Like I just don't think they would have paid too much attention. Like a Bond. Like even this one, like no mention made of the love interest from the last movie. Just she's gone and Bond is, you know, freewheeling again, and like they give a little nod to Tracy all those years ago, which is you know, weird now to be two Bonds removed from that movie.
I think this is also this I'm not as confident about, but I'm pretty sure that is the last reference to Tracy in the Bond series. I don't think Pierce Brosnan has like, again, like Daniel Craig is very much a reboot of the Bond series, but like Pierce Brosnan is like very much like kind of a soft reboot in its own way. Like they're not really going to reference the Tracy stuff anymore. It is just kind of be like a cleaner slate, and part of that is like just the age of Pierce Brosnan. Like he's young, so like it just makes like he grew up watching movies, right? So like they kind of have to adjust the fact that, like, oh, like his timeline is more like Cold War era as it kind of comes down to an end, and then like the 90s, right? And so like to kind of like change his age and everything too. And so, you know, I think it's the last time we get Tracy. I can't imagine there's any in Pierce Brosnan. There isn't any in Daniel Craig either. And so it is interesting watching these movies, I think, through that lens too. Just like, yeah, like this is, again, it's a bloodless coup. Like so much change is going to be like wiped off the board after this movie. That like, I think it is sort of a blessing in disguise how long that legal drama kind of lasted over like who owns James Bond, because it just kind of allowed them to just like wipe everything off the board and get a whole new clean slate in and say, we're going to do something brand new, right? They like had time to process the Cold War ending in a way that if they just done one immediately afterwards, they wouldn't have, I think. And I think it kind of works out better that the first Bond movie kind of after the end of the Cold War is one 6 years after it ended with a new Bond and a new aim and a new everything, so they can kind of reference back what's happened now. I think Property of Lady very much wouldn't have done that kind of story. But yeah, Pam is great. Let's go back to that point. Like, I think she's great. I think she totally holds her own against Bond. And more important to me, like, I think she is so pointedly not a damsel in distress Bond character. And it's awesome. And like, I think, especially like as I was writing the review for A View to a Kill before doing this, and it's like Stacey Sutton in A View to a Kill is like the most quintessential like damsel in distress Bond girl to me, right? Like she isn't there for no other reason, just be rescued again and again. And like Pam Bouvier is very much like, no, I don't need you. I was doing this whole thing by myself anyway. Like in some ways Bond just keeps causing her issues and problems. But I think she's awesome. I think she's one of my favorite Bond girls. And then, you know, getting around to the villains themselves, Sanchez and Daario are two of my favorite Bond villains ever. I think they are so of the times in the 80s and also like really cool and timeless in their own way. That like after such a, I think, plotting mess of villains in the Roger Moore era, where like Scaramanga and Max Zorin I think are cool. But otherwise, like all of Roger Moore's villains are kind of bland and forgettable. And even in Living Daylights, I think you kind of have like a mixed bag of villains a little bit. And here it's like, oh no, this is a great like classic Bond villain and a classic Bond henchman, and there's no sort of dispute in that fact.
Yeah, I really like him, and I like from the moment he appears on screen, I'm like, is that the? Yeah, that's one of the Agent Johnsons from Die Hard. And sure enough, it is. Like he's so Die Hard obviously has like the principal from Breakfast Club is basically trying to run the show, and then like the FBI comes in, Agent Johnson and Agent Johnson, and there's a whole like banter and back and forth, and they basically take over. Both of them are in this movie, because the other Agent Johnson is one of the DEA agents that like talks to Bond after the Felix stuff. Like that's him. So both of the Agent Johnsons are in this, and both of them are being obstacles to Bond, which is like this. It's a fun, weird. Obviously, Die Hard goes to drastically change the like action movie genre moving forward, and you get basically like Die Hard as a mini subgenre of Die Hard on a bus, Die Hard in a plane, Die Hard in a blah blah blah. So seeing like those two, admittedly, smaller characters, but still for fans of that movie, iconic characters in like make their way into the really Bond series here. Yeah. Certainly to varying degrees or whatever, but I thought that was just a fun little like almost meta thing. But it like in particular, like it was fun enough to like see him pop up, but then just he is really, really good in that role, and he's scary and intimidating. He has a weird iguana to be a weird little Bond villain kind of thing.
Who needs a cat?
Yeah, exactly. It's very much like a weird warped twist on Blofeld's cat kind of notion, including like he has a necklace that has like the diamonds or whatever. But like he's immediately set up as a threat to even the people who love him, but in this like very warped and twisted way. Like she has clearly betrayed him, but he like brings her back into the fold. He like accepts her with those flaws and all that stuff. Despite putting the premium on loyalty that he does. So it's like a weird little like she's maybe a weakness to him or something. I don't know, but yeah, like I love that Bond like uses his own money against him, and he just doesn't realize that's what's happening throughout. And so that's again like I'm a sucker for that very specific Count of Monte Cristo type of hero and villain kind of dynamic. So yeah, I really enjoy kind of everything. I love their first scene in the casino of kind of their back and forth and setting the stage, and Bond scoping him out, and him basically like making sure that he's going to keep tabs on this guy, and ultimately like rescuing him from the Hong Kong operation unknowingly kind of thing. Just makes for a lot of fun. Like I love the kind of dual identity that's being played with there, that obviously is going to come to a head when Daario realizes and puts two and two together what's going on, as like pretty much has to be the case. And I love that they appropriately set that up of like the only time he could have potentially realized it was Bond would have been in the like fishing for Sanchez kind of moment at the top. Like they're 10,000 feet up in the air. Maybe he's just not going to catch that that's Bond who just like hooked his plane to a helicopter, and then jumped off the plane to go parachute down into a wedding.
And he's much more focused on Felix at that point too.
Exactly. Yeah, he's much more focused on Felix. And throughout the chase, even like Bond is specifically kept back at the car after Sanchez has jumped out of it to go to the plane. So like they don't cross paths in a way that like would have blown Bond's cover. I think is a very like I appreciated that, and I appreciate that helps kind of like set things in motion for ultimately how that resolution is going to come back into play with Daario as well.
Yeah, I think it's cool too because we haven't even talked about it, but like the super Roadhouse inspired bar fight scene with Daario and Bond and Pam all kind of together is great, both for like the scene itself and then also the payoff at the end. But like the scene itself, I like there's definitely a contingent of people who like Bond movies who don't like that scene because it feels very different than most other Bond fight scenes.
Yeah.
Which is totally true. Like that is maybe the most like 80s action scene of a Bond movie. But as someone who likes Bond movies and also likes 80s action scenes, it's great. It's a great mixing of the world. And I think it fits in this kind of Bond movie where Bond is kind of going off of the book, and he is doing things a bit differently, right? And he is kind of consumed by like this anger and rage, and so I think it works well, right? Like I think if he tried to have that kind of scene in God forbid any Roger Moore movie, but even like a Sean Connery or Daniel Craig movie, yeah, that would maybe be a bit more jarring. But I think it works here in this specific moment. And so I always have a blast in the bar fight scene. I think it's super fun.
Yeah, I think I enjoy it. I enjoy a lot of the action in this movie. I kind of have like my notes of like a lot of the sequences are just really good, really well staged action. That one, like I include in it because it's a fun kind of rambunctious, crazy fight scene that allows like Bond isn't really trying to fight anybody to win in that. He's starting the fight and he's like continuing the fight to set up the escape for him and Pam. The most absurd element of it is, of course, the dancer that just tries as hard as she can to keep dancing while chaos is happening around her and basically only stops when somebody actually swings an active pool cue at her, kind of stuff.
The dancer who keeps on dancing feels like the same kind of like extra lineage as the two spacemen from Diamonds Are Forever who continue to go in slow motion even as everything is happening. Like I love that like I love extras in films so much sometimes. They're just these unending gifts.
Yeah. But like the Let's Go Fishing sequence was a cool, fun sequence, even if like I look at him like I'm pretty sure that's not how any of that physics would work.
I definitely had that thought. I was like, I'll embrace it.
You hook that the thing, that plane's going to keep flying, and the helicopter is going to get tugged along, and there's going to be a much stricter tension. It's not going to just like, oh, suddenly you've hooked a carabiner around this plane. Now the engines are going to fail and it's just going to like nosedive. That's not how that works at all. But it's still fun, and I appreciated, again, it's just the right level of ludicrous. Especially when you have Bond and Felix jumping out of the plane and parachuting down into the wedding. It's like, okay, sure, I
think it's interesting watching him too, because like I think I might at the end of this series do like a favorite pre-title sequence list as well. And like Timothy Dalton got two bangers, like because I love his one from Live and Dead 2. I love that training sequence. We talked a lot about that last week, and I think this is another one that's just like like it threads that line I think really well between absurd and like fun action, and while also giving you so much story information all at once. Like it sets up Daario's relationship with Sanchez, it sets up Sanchez with Lupe, it sets up Felix and Sanchez together, it sets up Bond and Felix together, it sets up Sharky even. Like it gives you all these characters introductions.
It gives like you this, like, the tease for Bond and Lupe later as well.
Yeah, it gives you like all that's a great point. It gives you all this stuff in like a 7-minute sequence that is fun and quick paced and exciting, and has like a fun, cool like parachute gag at the end that is it doing it well, unlike versus the one in like Moonraker with Jaws fucking collapse into the tent. It's like, no, here it's like a fun silly thing. Bond's got like a hole in the like his hat, like it's great. And I think that is what a good pre-title sequence should be to me in a Bond film, is like a lot of fun, set up a lot of the pieces for the rest of the movie so that we don't have to have these scenes after the pre-title sequence. Like here is a 5-minute exposition dump in M's office, and like we don't have that now, and the movie just goes along at a much quicker pace because of that. And I think it's such a great successful pre-title sequence that I wish more of this era of Bond films kind of had mimicked.
Continuing on in the action stuff, I really like the armored car breakout, which like obviously nowadays like I can point to something like The Dark Knight, or I can point to like Mission Impossible movies have done basically this same armored car thing of we're going to throw it into a river and we're going to like have underwater divers break out the bad guy and stuff like that. And so like realizing that this obviously predates a lot of those examples is a fun tie into this that also I think effectively ties into like the larger thing, like the fact that it is Crest, who is already kind of on the payroll and is already doing all this stuff, that is just using those same tools with a different purpose and with a different way. Again, like Killifer I think a terrible performance largely.
Yeah.
But
But
like it
not
sets him up
entirely his
as
fault, because like the audio stuff is he can only
yeah,
control
yeah.
that so much. Like that's like a very weird. I don't know what was going on with that.
Yeah. But it's I mean like even his like there are definitely a couple like performances in this where I'm like, you're not really doing anything for me. um but like it sets up his betrayal, which
Yeah.
like isn't necessarily a surprise. But it's going to help set Bond on this vendetta, and it's going to give him kind of his first leads into some of that. I really enjoy the skiing behind the plane sequence of
Yeah.
Bond. Like Bond fully in
That
his
whole
vendetta.
drug,
Yeah, I
money
mean,
bust
like
is great.
it's my full note on that is better underwater action that leads into the skiing from the plane sequence,
Hmm.
because the underwater stuff isn't outstaying its welcome. It's serving a purpose. He's down there is like chopping up the drugs and
Yeah.
completely like fucking up this operation in a fun, engaging way. And so yeah, like I really enjoyed like that whole kind of lead into it. And then like the tanker stuff at the end I think is a lot of fun too.
Mm.
Um it like and is reminiscent of like what would later be like Fast and Furious kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
That's a great
for
connection.
for as big and bulky as those tankers are going to be, I think they find ways to keep it fun and engaging and finding new approaches to it so that it doesn't like necessarily outstay its welcome.
Yeah. I think to double onto the like drug smuggling like bust that Bond kind of does with Crest, I think that sequence is really good. And I'm glad you liked it too, because I definitely had the thought when like anytime you go underwater on a Bond movie, I'm like, I hope Trevor likes this.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you liked it, because like that whole sequence I think is really cool. And like talking it back with you now, I'm kind of reflecting like how well crafted this story is, and the fact that like, yeah, Crest obviously spots Bond, but then Bond and Crest never see each other again in that movie, right? And Crest is never with Sanchez again in that movie until the very end when he obviously dies, right? And so like there's never a chance for like Crest to be like, oh, like that guy ruined your operation, right? And so when he does, you have to like tell it to Sanchez, but can't put a face to it. Yeah, it does sound utterly ridiculous, of course, right? And
Yeah.
so like it's a great like payoff to that. It's like all the people who would have interacted with the Bond before this never get like synced back together again until the very end. And so the story does kind of have this like great kind of arc because of that. And I think that sequence is fun. I like Crest a lot. Like he's actually one of my like favorite like smaller characters in the movie, because like he just gives such a like fun, kind of unhinged but also logical performance, right? Like he's one who like some of the characters like, forget about this vendetta, just focus on the money, Sanchez. And Sanchez is like, it's all about loyalty, man. I'm gonna betray all of you. Let me show you how it's done, guys. Right? And like it's sort of funny because in their own ways, like Bond and Sanchez are actually like very similar.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of just like being obsessed about this one thing, and like all the other outside world and concerns which kind of fall by the wayside. And like there's so much collateral damage done by both guys. And I think you see that to like great effect and obviously Crest's arc, but like the escape itself is rad. I think
I also like that like going onto the ship, like Bond now knows the layout of the ship, so like he's able to walk Pam through it later. She's like looking at notes, basically going off what he described to get down to where she needs to kind of let him in and give him access.
I also like the fact that, you know, Bond and Lupe have their scene, obviously, which is really good, I think. And then you get to the moment where, like, yeah, like he's stabbing all the drugs, and then like when all the goons come on him underwater, that is like, it's almost like this really claustrophobic fight because they're all like right on top of each other, and it feels really intense in a way that something from like Thunderball, for example, never really managed to like mimic. And I think here you get it in 1/50th of the time, but it is done to way more like dramatic, intense effect. And then like he gets like ripped out and goes right into like the skiing behind the plane sequence. And then the plane sequence itself is really cool. Like him like knocking out the two guys, and they've mastered it more from where they were at in like the Roger Moore era, where like when the guys fall out of the planes, they don't look just like random dummies falling. Their legs aren't like flailing through the wind. And so like it's actual people with parachutes. And so like it looks better than when you just like push out a dummy from a plane.
Yeah, definitely doesn't like the altitudes don't necessarily line up with like
not at all.
That the first guy goes out high enough that a parachute works, and the second guy Bond throws out, and then we see like the other angle of it, and it's like he was doing it as he was like flying down right above the boat. It's like that's not at all where you were in
don't worry about it. Yeah.
But I also want to say on Crest, I had to look it up because he was giving a very Victor Sullivan kind of performance, and I had to make sure. I was like, is that like that's not the same actor as Sully? It is not, but like I there were a couple times in his delivery where I was like, that
he'd have been a fun
to my
Sully.
ear that sounds like a Sully kind of vibe.
And then the tanker chase sequence is, I think that's rad. I mean, that's obviously like a standout sequence of the film. And it's fun. Like I've enjoyed doing these past 16 episodes because it's like fun to see the evolution of like the car chases and action sequences to the series, right? Like to go from like the Dr. No car chase, right, to like this tanker chase, I think shows like an increase in mastery of what they're doing. Because like this tanker chase could be basically the Thunderball underwater sequence on land, right? Like very slow, heavy moving vehicles that can't get much momentum going to them. But the way they execute it, I think the way like Bond is like navigating underneath like the belly of one of them, right? And Sanchez shooting right next to him is fun. Like the fights he's got, like are all
shout
really
out
good.
shout out to the ricochets being the opening of the Bond theme.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, and like especially because like we had talked about when what was that in Octopussy, was it, where like they actually like play the Bond theme in the film. And so like that I was like, oh hey, there's a little like fun nod to it of like ding 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 just being like, oh, that's a like that immediately now like draws to mind like the Suicide Squad or any of those movies now that have trailers where like the gunfire is timed to some whatever the trailer song they're doing is. I was like, that's a fun little like gag that doesn't really add anything to this movie, but it's a cute little Easter egg.
I think the final sequence is great. The usage of Stinger missiles is awesome. Sanchez taking out one last henchman is really good. And then like the final scene between Bond. Like what I love about the tanker sequence is how beat the hell everyone gets in that sequence. Like by the time you get to the final moment of like Bond and Sanchez together, like Bond looks like shit. Sanchez looks terrible too. Like they're all just like beaten up and like bloody and ripped up in clothes. And so like it feels like Bond has had to like earn that final moment so much and like has been put through the ringer in ways that in other Bond movies, especially throughout the Roger Moore era, where he's basically like indestructible, nothing will ever touch him. Like it's so refreshing to see, I think, Timothy Dalton make Bond much more of an actual human being.
I mean, even from the Roadhouse fight, like he's on that boat with Pam and has like the blood just like from his lip through the whole time.
And Bond,
we get that a couple times,
and like Bond makes mistakes, right? Like from as simple as like we're out of gas and Pam's on like I haven't heard that one in a while to like all these other things, right? Like I like that. I think Timothy Dalton really enjoyed making Bond fallible and someone who fails. Maybe not just as often as he succeeds, but definitely a good percentage of the time still too. And I think it's just an element that helps make that character more of an actual person in a way that after 12 years and 7 films with Roger Moore, where like Bond doesn't make a mistake, I think in any of his movies, it's sort of like, all right, like this is nice, like he is a person and not a superhero, and he can get beaten up and betrayed and caught, right, like a lot, and I think it just makes it a much more engaging kind of character than what we got in a lot of the Roger Moore stuff.
Yeah. Shout out to, I think you kind of alluded to it there, but shout out to Sanchez just killing Truman Lodge there at the end.
Yeah.
Just being like
murdering him.
Yeah, you're right. I do need to cut some overhead. Like, how did you think that was going to play? How did you think yelling at the sociopath your drug lord, sociopath, murderer boss was going to play out, you stupid 80s yuppie, greed is good dumbass. Like,
Yep. Yeah.
good.
Right out of
You
Wall
got
Street.
exactly
Yeah.
what you deserved.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree to that. Trevor, what did you think of Q?
He's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like him kind of getting to again, like we saw hints of this in Octopussy.
Yep.
But like him getting to be out there in the field, like it, I like I almost wish it hadn't been set up with that like Money Penny and M scene of like Money Penny calling Q Branch, because like when they're like, your uncle has checked in, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be Q. And sure enough, that's exactly what it is. But I like that he's like there to help Bond out. This was a much more jovial, friendly relationship than sometimes we get with the antagonism between Bond and Q. And I think like I enjoyed that dynamic, and I appreciated, like, even though you're not here on an official capacity, like we're all gonna treat this like it's one of your 2-week resignation kind of things, and then you're gonna be back. Like, we know that's what's happening here. You're doing this as off the books kind of thing. So we're gonna give you the resources and support we can. We're just gonna do it on our own time or whatever. Like, I appreciate that dynamic and the like energy he brought to the all the Isthmus city stuff.
Mm-hmm. I love Desmond Wand in general. Like, I think he obviously is such an important part of the Bond kind of mythology. And I think with Timothy Dalton, we're kind of seeing a shift in his dynamic with Bond, right? Especially with Roger Moore's Bond, it is very kind of antagonistic and confrontational. And it's definitely kind of a similar dynamic with at least like the back half of Sean Connery's films. And that is fun and engaging in its own way. I think particularly Connery and Llewellyn have a good chemistry. Him and Moore can be a little bit over the top at times. But I think here, where you kind of have such a stark age difference with him and Dalton and then him and Pierce Brosnan, they shifted to kind of much more of a almost like father-son dynamic in its own way, right? And I think you see that carried over here with obviously him giving up his own time to come help Bond out on this revenge mission, and obviously some of the stuff that'll happen in, the Pierce Brosnan era as well. And I love it, right? And like, I will acknowledge I'm biased because like this is kind of the relationship between Bond and Q I grew up with, as did you, but like, I love it so much. I think it works so well. I think Desmond Llewellyn is particularly enjoyable as like a kind of like grumpy but ultimately like loving father figure to Bond. And I think you get so much of that here. He gives like such a great performance of what is usually kind of like a 1 or 2 scene kind of character, and he gets so much fun. I think him and Pam have really good chemistry together as well. Like, I think it's funny watching this movie right after I just watched the Lego Batman movie, but like they make their own little like de facto family, just like Batman does in Lego Batman, and like it's great, right? Like in a similar vein to Lego Batman, like Bond has to kind of learn that he can't do this all on his own. He needs to like get help from other people, and I love the fact that like Q is just always there. Every time Bond pushes him away, he's just there going to be like, no, like I'm here to help if you need it, kind of thing. In particular, I always really enjoy the sequence of like Pam being the like docking like pilot and Q wearing like the cap as like the little like ship driver, right? And Bond in like the water. Like, they make a really good fun team, and it kind of makes me sad that we maybe didn't get another film in the next 6 years, because I think it'd have been fun to like see Q in the field again. And by the time we get to the next Bond film, Desmond Llewellyn is legitimately in his like late 70s and early 80s now. Like, he's just that much older to where like it is harder to make those work. But yeah, like he's so much fun, and it's a blast. I love kind of Bond and Q's dynamic throughout the film.
Yeah. Similar to that, I love the little like mission that he and Pam go on to like infiltrate the hideout. And I love Pam basically just like absolutely having the right read on the Wayne Newton character and just being like, this guy's gonna be lecherous. I'm gonna play up the country bumpkin. Yep. I've got a lot of money that's gonna get him in, and then I'm definitely gonna be like, yeah, I'll sleep with you kind of vibes, and then pull the gun on him.
and take the money back.
And shout
at
out
the
to
end.
Wayne Newton for like just like having fun with that little role, just being having the time of his life, just largely being himself, but now with a mustache kind of thing.
Yeah, like I've never done that much research into it, but like I have no idea if Wayne Newton was just like a big Bond fan and was like, hey, like can I just be in this movie and like just like have like a tiny part in it or not? But like he's a blast. He's such a ridiculous character. But like one that fits in the more like grounded world of like the Timothy Dalton Bond movies. And I just love his like weird random side arc that he's kind of got going on.
I mean, he is absolutely like playing the like televangelist craze of the era kind of thing.
Yeah. And just like
and,
pretty much all the televangelists is also just like actually
and yeah, there's absolutely
bankrupt.
shady stuff going on underneath, and he's like using that to exploit for his own personal gain. But he's also like, he's probably keeping himself at some kind of arm's length from the actual like drug deal stuff. The less he knows, the better he is. But he can still kind of do what he needs them to do and live a life of luxury, surrounded by nuns or whatever he's got around him. There, the
soundproof room.
Yeah.
Trevor, any final thoughts on License to Kill before we dive into the podcast within a podcast here?
I just want to shout I saw it in like the IMDb trivia somewhere, but I want to shout out like when the helicopter was going into the base, I was like, something about this doesn't look right. Like if this were like a real proper set, like we've seen this kind of thing in like in like the thing going down into the volcano layer, stuff like that. So I'm like, something is wrong here. And reading that like, oh yeah, that was just like a model, like a model is like lifting the hatch up on the thing, and it was just placed like right near the camera, and they were just doing some like depth perception trickery. I was like, that's kind of what it felt like was happening. Looking at it, here through a 2022 lens, because like watching that, I was like, we're hanging out on this shot for a long time, and we are deliberately not seeing the helicopter go into this base from the reverse angle. So they're clearly doing something here that's just weird. And it was just like, I appreciated that like my suspicion there was proved right in reading through the IMDb trivia on the movie. But like, yeah, it definitely feels weird that, I guess, like you said, none of it was filmed at Pinewood Studios, not even the like the cocaine lab base, because that feels like it was a set.
It definitely could have been a set, but it wasn't filmed at Pinewood.
Okay. I wonder, then interesting, because I'm very curious.
I'm
then,
sure
like,
it was a set, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously. But yeah, even that, like, there was even an element of like, I was kind of impressed by the, like, I don't know if the science of it would actually work at all or anything, but like the plan of like, yeah, we can dilute the cocaine by like it's completely soluble in gasoline, and then we have a filtration system that basically pulls it out after customs or whatever. And so you get gasoline with a crap ton of cocaine in paste form. And I was like, that's a ingenious kind of thing. If the science behind that was actually legit, probably not, but like, solid and helps like establish why this empire can grow to, the level it has. Obviously, we also see it in a very like practical, like, oh, he's just straight up smuggling drugs into, the Florida Keys through the Wavecrest company, and dropping off planes of money or like trading out planes of drugs for subs of money. But yeah, a solid plan had Bond's vendetta not gotten in the way.
Yeah, agreed. That takes us to, speaking of, Villains Corner here, where we're going to talk about the villains of the film. Trevor, what did you think of Fran Sanchez?
I mean, again, I like him even better than General Koskov last week. And I liked Koskov better than Goldfinger myself. So like he's my number one, or he would be my number one. I if you want to keep Goldfinger at the top, I'm not going to argue with you on that one. But like I thought, like, performance really good, characterization really strong, and like all of his back and forth with Timothy Dalton was like really fun, solid stuff. I mean, like really anybody he was interacting with, like his stuff with Heller, I think is really good. His stuff with Daario, really good. His stuff with Lupe, really good. Like he gets to be a like well-rounded threat, in a way that I don't like. Nothing about Goldfinger himself feels dangerous. Goldfinger feels dangerous because of his mind or because of his plan or because of having Oddjob around or something like that. Whereas like Sanchez, like even if he doesn't have his henchmen around, he can do damage to people and will do damage to people. And I appreciate that element to his character. So yeah, he would be the top of my list.
Yeah, I agree. Sanchez, is the new top villain. I think
I also like that there's like mystery around like the idea of like, are you really Colombian, as like some kind of like news reporter kind of throws, because you also have a name like Franz. It's like, yeah, what's going on there? Like what is your actual like lineage here? Have you just kind of like installed yourself as a drug lord in a in a South American, Central American company or country, or what's going on there? Is there even some like added layers and backstory there that like doesn't get fully fleshed out?
I think Sanchez is great. He's always one of my favorite Bond villains. I think he is so distinct, and it's such an iconic turn. I I love a lot of the '60s era Bond villains, like we've talked about before. I have a lot of them. I would have them ranked higher than you. But I think Sanchez is so good. I think he delivers something so fun and sinister and charming all at once, where it is utterly believable that he would have risen to the position he is in, because he is really endearing, I think, and he does have this kind of, I think, charm to him that does kind of pull people to him. You can see it, I think, even in his interactions with Bond. But he can just turn on a dime so quickly and be so sinister and be so savage. I think it's a little bit of what they were trying to make kind of happen with Max Zorin. I think it's done here to even better effect. And part of that is just, I think, help the fact that like Robert Davi is not Christopher Walken, so you can get like lost in it a bit more. Yeah, I think it's great. I think it is a great, great, great Bond villain performance. It's always one of my favorites. I think it will still be that after we get done with this series. I'm totally content to make that the new number one.
I admittedly, I don't know if he'll be number one long, knowing who we have next week. But
I don't either. But it's a great performance. That should not take away from how good of a performance it is.
Absolutely. And you talking about that just reminded me, one of the other things I wanted to shout out that is unrelated to like the villain, but like in the idea of like, oh, he also runs, like, not only does he run the bank, but he also runs the casino. I also loved Bond playing blackjack instead of Baccarat, so that we can actually follow and understand what's going on. And when Bond makes a split, like, it's a way easier thing to understand what's happening. And the dealer busted, and so Bond just cleans up, and like fun to see that. And again, just like I love the element of that is he's playing with house money. The house doesn't know it's house money, but he's playing with house money in a really fun way.
I also like that scene for Bond just winning more and more and more, and then them just being like, send Lupe down, and like Lupe, and like that whole interaction of like, you're gonna lose how much? Not a lot, but enough, right? Like that whole back and forth, I think, is great. So like they have like their cleaners to come in to like stack the deck to make sure you'll lose, kind of thing. I thought it was like a really fun element of like Sanchez owning the casino as well.
And I like that like that establishes even kind of like that's like she probably got her start there in the casino, caught Sanchez's eye, and Sanchez was like, bring her to me, kind of, and that's probably how that relationship starts and becomes what it is. Like I enjoyed like just giving us that little bit of like, oh, that's enough backstory to really help fill her out even more, as well. I
also really like Lupe. We haven't really talked about her a lot, but like I think her character is really interesting. Like I think there's like an element that like she's a little bit like Scaramanga's girlfriend in Man with the Golden Gun, right? Where like I think she does genuinely have like this sort of attraction to like dangerous characters, right? And this level of like action, whether that is Sanchez or Bond or like her ending up with like near like the president, right? At the end of the movie, like I think she likes power, and I think she likes an element of danger in her life. And so I think that makes her way more than just someone who is kind of like held captive by Sanchez. Like I think there's an element of her like wanting to be here a little bit and wanting the money and the glamour and everything kind of comes with it, and that adds, I think, a level of like complexity to her that I find really interesting, versus a lot of the other Bond girls we get. And so I also just wanted to give her a shout out. Like I think she is also really good and really fun, and her chemistry with Sanchez and her chemistry with Bond are each, I think, really good.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but Sanchez is number one. Do you also want to rank Daario as well?
Yeah, I mean, we could throw Daario in there.
He's like, Benicio del Toro. He gets a ranking as well. You know
yeah,
I mean?
yeah, that's absolutely fair. Yeah, I'm trying to think where I would put him, because like I really like him a lot.
Jaws and Odd Job are kind of the big henchmen we have on the list.
Yeah, I mean, but like, I mean, I probably like him better than. I like him better than Red Grant. I probably like him even better than Blofeld 2.0, but that's like I don't expect I'll win that one. But yeah, like Red Grant, like above Red Grant or above Kananga, like I can appreciate either of those.
See, I love this. I love our list here because like it is so different than what our respective individual list would look like. I think because like I probably like Daario more than Scaramanga.
Oh, okay.
But I don't like him more than Blofeld 2.0, right? Or Red Grant.
Right, yeah.
It's sort of like an interesting thing of like where I want to rank him. I actually really like Daario. Like I'm totally content to have him below Max Zorn and above Scaramanga.
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, like I like Daario a lot. Like again, like he would be different than my list because obviously I like Blofeld and Red Grant more. But the way it's shaken out, yeah, like I totally like him. I think he is easily one of the strongest henchmen in the series, right? Like alongside, Odd Job, Red Grant, Jaws. I think Daario is right in that same kind of.
And it certainly helps list. That like you cast somebody who, like, while at the time still largely unknown and whatnot, but obviously is going to go on to be one of the better working actors of the last 30 years. So yeah, like having Benicio del Toro in that like certainly elevates it from what could have been an otherwise unremarkable, not like no impact henchman. Like I could very easily have seen a version of this movie that we wouldn't even be thinking of Daario, and Daario would have just like you might not have even considered Daario in the like, all right, who are the henchmen Bond killed kind of section. But I think he definitely elevates the role and definitely has some fun with it. And I think even within like the plot of the movie, he's given that pivotal, like he's the one that can tie Bond to the escapades that were happening in both places, and kind of like,
and the one who kills Della too.
Yeah, definitely. So he can basically like serve that narrative purpose, to kind of lead to like the third act kind of climax.
I also think that, I don't know if he's ultimately a favorite henchman or not. Obviously, on this list, he's going to be our favorite henchman that we have ranked so far. But, like, I think one thing that's different from him compared to, like, Odd Job or Jaws is that he isn't in the movie ultimately a ton. But I think each scene he gets is so good, right? Like, there's just such an energy to him. And it's obviously partially because of the fact that Benicio del Toro is going to be a future Oscar winner. He's very talented. But like he just stands out in every single moment he gets, even though it's not as much as, the scenes that Jaws or Odd Job would get. He's probably closest to like Red Grant, who just kind of appears sporadically and then one big sequence.
There's
definitely, I also think there's like something special for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think that's all in service of the narrative, because there's definitely a point like where I realized we hadn't seen Daario in a while, and I was like, what's going on with him? Where did we leave him? He got left at the Roadhouse fight, but he survived. Like he didn't get killed in that. And so I was like, so how is he going to come back into play? And I appreciate that the way they bring him back into play is because he's the one who can ID Bond and bring Bond's whole plan kind of come crashing down. So I think that like, again, serves that character incredibly well compared to like, well, Odd Job knew it was Bond and knew it was Bond at the golf course and didn't do anything about that. So what was the point of that kind of stuff in Goldfinger? So yeah, like I think Daario, absolutely, solid, kind of high placement here.
Yeah. So that has the Villains Corner ranking come out with Fran Sanchez at number 1 as a new top dog, like Troy said, maybe only for a week. Art Goldfinger at number 2 now. General Koskov at number 3. That's a Max Zorin at number 4. Daario at number 5.
We got 2 top 5 villains in this movie
6.
alone.
Yeah, Blowfield 2.0 at number 7, Red Grant at 8, Kananga and Mr. Big at 9, and then Jaws at 10. And then we have Oddjob, Brad Whitaker, Blowfield 1.0, Blowfield 3.0, and then kind of the doldrums here with Hugo Drax, Emilio Largo, Rosa Klebb, Dr. No, Kamal Khan. I would probably like Kamal Khan. Well, we'll get to that. General Orlov, Ari, and Stromberg at the bottom of the list there.
I wonder where Blofeld 4.0 is going to end up on this list when all is said and done.
Yeah, you'll see. Next up, we've got those musical moments. Trevor, how did you like Gladys Knight out here doing the theme for the movie?
Admittedly, this was another forgettable one for me. Like it didn't really make any kind of imprint on me. Not bad, but just kind of like I think after such a fun opening sequence, I was like, okay, yep, we're in the obligatory Bond thing. Okay, let's go through this. Let's wrap this up so we can get back to the movie, please.
I think that one of the elements that will come with the leap forward to the Pierce Brosnan era, and why I reference a lot that like I think the Pierce Brosnan era was like the beginning of like the modern era of Bond, is that they got better at having very different sounding Bond theme music, I think, too, right? Whereas like Sheryl Crow is going to do one of the Pierce Brosnan ones, right? And like Garbage is going to do another one. Like they're going to have very distinct voices, because I feel like so much of the ones through the 70s and 80s, right? If the 60s, you have very kind of iconic Bond themes, and then they kind of like peter out in the 70s and 80s. They're kind of, these all sound largely the same-ish with like one or two exceptions kind of thing. I think they begin to take on much more of a unique voice after this. This is, I mean, Gladys Knight is a talented musician, talented singer. This is utterly fine to me, right? Like, it is totally like, it's fine, right? Like, I look at our list, and it's sort of a shame because, like, we've just done mostly the ones that are like, that's fine. Literally, we just watched this movie last week. I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in Love and Daylight's theme. And we have it ranked 4th, right? So, like, I would put it, I guess, below that. I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I like, if anything, if anything, actually looking at this, I'm going to put it below A View to a Kill, because that at least had Duran Duran going for it. And that was more interesting than Gladys Knight's just kind of doing another interpretation of like Shirley Bassey doing a Bond theme. I think that is maybe what it is. Like, it feels like everyone since like 1969 has just trying to do like their own interpretation of like a Shirley Bassey Bond theme, pretty much, and none of them are as interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the QLab gadgets, we got
real quick. The last little thing I want to say on musical moments, obviously, like this little time capsule of when we're recording this, but No Time to Die won the Oscar last night.
It did
for best theme. So how many best theme songs is that they've won now?
They won for Skyfall.
So
I think Sam
Skyfall
Smith won for Spectre, and then No Time to Die.
Yeah, you are correct. Yep, looks like
so. Actually, they've won 3 consecutive ones at that for the Bond series. We'll see when we get to Spectre what my thoughts on that are. But
yeah, just
that takes us to the
that is the like where we're at in our timeline of things. That is a thing that just happened. You get here,
the Oscars. If only this is an Oscars podcast.
I'm very glad it's not.
In the QLab gadgets section, Trevor, what were some of your favorite gadgets you got shown off here?
I liked the palm print, because that's gonna come back, right? Then didn't he have like one of those in Casino Royale or something like that?
Yeah,
but he does.
I know it's in a future Bond movie.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't need the need to be connected so that like Q can.
It doesn't need the giant battery.
Exactly. Yeah. Q doesn't need to like program it and anything. It's just there, like pre-programmed for. But I like seeing that, being like, oh, that's a cool thing that I know is gonna like
Yeah.
I know, like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I think it comes back in a future Bond thing. If not, it
Yeah.
has definitely been a feature of some kind of
Pop
like
culture
modern,
thing. Yeah.
like it might be in like Mission Impossible movies or something like that. It's definitely a gadget in a modern incarnation. So seeing that idea, floated back here in 1989 was a cool little nod. I was definitely curious why the camera, why the like X-ray / laser camera also kind of creates a skeleton for the picture of
Mm-hmm.
El Presidente. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a weird choice. Um,
I love
uh,
that's one of my favorite gadgets in the series. Actually, it's just so goofy. It's great.
yeah. I was sad we didn't see the alarm clock. The explosive alarm clock gets
Oh
set
my
up, doesn't get
god.
used. I was bummed by that.
Guaranteed to not wake anyone up is such a great line by Q2.
Yeah. But yeah, so like I loved his little travel kit of gadgets.
Yeah, it's so much
That
fun.
kind of played out there. Trying to think, was there anything else of note?
The toothpaste that's
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
like the
I guess
exploding
yeah,
like dynamite
the
thing.
plastic explosives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed those elements. I do want to give a shout out to like Bond improvising gadgets, i.e., electric eels.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fun little
Yeah.
facet that he used in the shark sequence.
I mean, even improvising gadgets at the end, right, with the lighter being how
Yeah,
he uses to defeat the enemy, right, in grisly fashion.
yeah.
Um,
It did seem like a good payoff for what was otherwise like a, why is that lighter like shoot, like that's not a Q thing, why is it shooting out a flame?
Felix Slider coming in clutch.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some good gadgets here. Trevor, what were your final reviews and thoughts on License to Kill?
Yeah, it's definitely another one like I really enjoy, solid, like it is definitely at the top of the list for me. I don't like, I've been kind of sitting here, do I like Living Daylights better than this or not?
Mm-hmm.
Um I think there are elements that I like better in this and
Mm-hmm.
elements that I don't. Like I don't like that like
Agreed.
we're back to a Bond that immediately rushes into a relationship with Pam, kind of on the boat, but then they are kind of like, you know, a little, they're a little hot and cold over the course of the
Yeah.
movie. Like I which I would appreciate better if they hadn't started out hot there on the boat, I guess. Because it seems certainly that while they're out there stranded waiting for somebody to pick them up, I guess, that they're, going below deck to have a fun evening together. And then like the next, like when they're down south of the border, they're, back at arm's length with one another. So like that was an element that I was like, I'm confused by that choice. Um, but like I like the villains of this one better than
Mm-hmm.
the last one. I like the action of this one probably a little bit better than the last
Mm.
one as well. So yeah, I think ultimately I'll go ahead and give this one the edge over the Living Daylights.
Ooh.
But
Oh,
again,
okay.
like I mean, I've been very pleasantly surprised by the Timothy Dalton
Yeah.
era, and I don't know if we're gonna dive into I imagine we're gonna dive into Bond on Bond, but yeah, like
Yep.
I was talking to Cam the other day, yesterday when we recorded another podcast, basically saying like spoilers, like I had, yeah, I'd already watched this movie. I was like, Timothy Dalton easily easily tops my favorite Bond list of the Bonds that we've had so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's like not even close. So yeah, I'm largely just bummed that like this is all we're gonna get of him.
Yeah. Yeah, this is it. I think that's exciting. Okay. Yeah, so for Trevor, then a new number one back-to-back weeks. We're hitting a good
It's
stride for each other. You might have for a few weeks in a row here. Yeah.
yeah, because I it'll be very curious to see like how Goldeneye holds up for me. But I can like
Yeah.
currently in my mind, I'm like Goldeneye is going to be number one next week.
Yeah.
But maybe that will have aged a little more poorly than I want. Oh, also like in that, speaking of things aging poorly, the abundant use of Orientals, I think is a that is a like, oh, this was made at a different place and time kind of element to this movie. And some of the like Bond's casual misogyny that you kind of alluded to earlier, I think are some of those earmuffs moments that it's like,
I think
these are still a little rough, that I can't firmly be like, yeah, this is a good movie by modern standards kind of element.
The Orientals thing is definitely that. I do think the Bond like casual misogyny thing is much more of a deliberate thing. Like I think they're trying to like point attention to that aspect of it. Like I do think Timothy Dalton was trying to like, again, his whole thing is that like Bond is not a hero, right? He's not like a role model. He's someone who's more kind of complex than that. And I think there wasn't a ton of that in Living Daylights really, but I think here he much more wanted to be like, yeah, like this guy is fallible.
And
I agree.
I think it plays into like they gave a better like a character for him to work against in Pam. And so like it's a kind of thing of like she can take it more than Kara,
and push back.
And she can push back against that and try and be, more assertive and stuff. But yeah, some of the like, this is my executive assistant, Miss Kennedy or whatever. I appreciated the Bouvier Kennedy little naming.
Yeah, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Like very fun.
It's like, I get that even if it's like a deliberate choice, it still isn't great. It's
fair enough.
Just because they're calling attention to it or highlighting that like it's a problem doesn't make it less of a problem.
Sure.
That the character is fine doing that.
Sure. Well, very exciting. And then Trevor takes a number 1 with License to Kill, his new number 1 movie, The Living Daylights number 2. So yeah, like Trevor said, when we get to the Bond and Bond section, his 2 favorite movies so far are number 1 and number 2, Timothy Dalton. Then we've got Goldfinger at number 3 for Trevor, The Spy Who Loved Me at 4, From Russia with Love at 5, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Live and Let Die, Diamonds Are Forever, A View to a Kill, and then rounding out the back half, we've got Dr. No, Octopussy, You Only Live Twice, Golden Gun, Moonraker, Thunderball, and at last place for Trevor, we've got For Your Eyes Only.
It's so weird seeing, because you have it in the doc, You Only Live Twice abbreviated, so it's like, it's weird seeing YOLO, but YOLT.
Yeah, YOLT. It's a new energy drink on the market.
Yeah.
In terms of me, I'm excited about this one because you like License to Kill more than I do, even. And I've long been a License to Kill defender, so it's fun to find someone who's even more excited about it than I am. I think License to Kill is great. I think it's a ton of fun. I think it's got, like we just went through the ranking for, great set of villains who I think complement and like flesh out Bond really, really well. I think Pam is a really great co-lead for Bond. I think Desmond Llewellyn is a ton of fun. Like this movie is a solid like 8 out of 10 for me. I think it's great. I think it is maybe a hair too long at times. Particularly in like the like kind of like second to last act era, but like I think it's a ton of fun. I think it's really good. I also like the dynamic of Bond getting in the organization to kind of destroy it from the inside. So when I look at my list, right, like I think this is, around On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Dr. No territory for me, which sounds bad, but I think it's just a testament to the quality of the movie, actually. I think it's got a way better James Bond than On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I cannot stress that enough. But yeah, you know what? Fuck it. It's my list. I know the hell I want. So yeah, I'll rank it. That'll be what, 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6. So like I put License to Kill above On Her Majesty's Secret Service and below The Spy Who Loved Me. I think it's super fun and really, really enjoyable. And is a kind of great follow up to what we got in The Living Daylights for Timothy Dalton. Trevor, you alluded to it. Bond on Bond. We've had
real quick before we get too much further away from it. I did want to call out one of the things you just reminded me of is you were talking. We didn't really touch, like we touched on a little bit, and then we were like, oh, we'll get back to that. Was like again going back to Sanchez as like a psycho, using the decompression chamber to explode Crest's head.
Milton Crest, yeah.
like that's another thing also in the like I don't know how well this holds up. Like the effect I think holds up fine or whatever. It's certainly, you know, leaps and bounds over the Kananga one from years earlier or whatever. But it's definitely a like I think for a modern audience, we wouldn't see that sequence. I think that is very much like of the 80s era that was much more like
Mm,
got away with a lot more in terms of like blood and gore and violence in
yeah,
film. Like seeing something like that in a modern film feels like that would tip
and
the tip
R-rated.
it into an R. Whereas like if you like had him screaming and then you like it would cut away and you
You
just
just hear
suddenly see
boom.
like red splatter against the window or something. That's how they would do the movie today, I think, to try and keep it PG-13 or whatever. Um but yeah, that was just another element that like I when that happened, I was like, okay, yeah, this is like
Yeah.
because especially because I wasn't completely clear what was going to happen in that sequence. I didn't know necessarily it was a decompression chamber or what was going on. I
Yeah.
like he's turning up the thing on this thing that's doing something that is making Crest very unhappy. But like when
Yeah.
he goes and like hatches the air hose away and it just it balloons his head, I was like, oh, that is not what I was
Yeah.
expecting to happen in this moment. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
That is a like I think of like one of my earliest movie memories is seeing Total Recall.
Ooh,
Well, but like
yeah.
that is like the first movie I remember ever watching.
Mhm.
Like my parents were having some friends over and they threw it on and I'm like I should not be watching this movie, but seeing like heads explode and I remember like
Yeah.
very distinctly like somebody basically being decapitated by an elevator in that movie. And like this is that era of like, oh, they special effects can do these kinds of things, so they do these kinds of things now. And it feels so out of place with like
Yeah.
what else has been set up apart from yeah maybe Kananga, but Kananga the thing was so absurdly silly that it kind of like you know gets a little bit of a like pass
A pass. Yeah.
because of that. But yeah, like seeing that sequence in this was just like, oh, that was a wild, you know, minute of cinema there in this movie,
Yeah. Uh yeah, I mean this movie's really dark. We kind of touched on a lot of grisly deaths, I think, and just like even people who
or
aren't getting
dismemberments.
killed,
Yeah,
dismemberments. Yeah, exactly. And I do think it is super of the era, and again, it's part of I think why there are definitely people who watch Bond movies who don't like this movie. I understand why they wouldn't like it. It works for me in a lot of ways. I think it is really, I think, interesting because it is so tonally different from a lot of the rest of the Bond series. And again, you arguably never get a Bond movie as like dark and gory as this, but if so, you only get like one really kind of challenger from the Craig era. Um, yeah, the Milton Crest scene in particular, is it is the Temple of Doom rip the heart out of the man's chest as like everyone's screaming around you scene. Um, yeah, the PG-13 rating was just invented a few years ago, guys, and we are going to utilize it to its full effect here, kind of thing. And yeah, if it was made today, I am sure it would have been a very different sequence. But yeah, in terms of Bond on Bond, Trevor, you've gotten the entire 2-film run of Timothy Dalton. What are your thoughts on him?
yeah. I mean, like I really liked you know everything he brought to the table on this one. Again, I'm especially the pendulum swinging from Connery to Moore to Dalton. Like I was. I don't think I've been shy at all on this. I was so done with the Roger Moore era so early on in there.
Mm,
And so like Timothy Dalton coming in and having a much more grounded, realistic kind of take compared to the Dalton or the Moore stuff was exactly what I was looking for and what I needed.
mm,
And like helped turn this series around for me where it's just like I hate so much of why did I commit to 25 weeks of this?
mm,
Because even beyond Moore, I just liked
yeah.
this a lot better than the Connery stuff.
Hmm.
Because so much of the Connery stuff feels certainly of its era, of its time, and like Connery, I think again so much of the wind is taken out of Connery because I can only see it through the lens of Austin Powers parody, whereas like this isn't trying to be that version of Bond. This is a much more like I think we will. Yeah, Pierce Brosnan will be like a little bit slipped back into like camp territory for some of his stuff, and a little bit more jokey and like lighthearted than this Dalton era. But yeah, this is exactly what I needed after 7 movies of Roger Moore. And again, I'm bummed that we don't get more, but there's also an element of like I'm glad we don't necessarily get more, because even into the Brosnan era and the Craig era, those can swing wildly in terms of quality. So like the fact that he got 2 good ones, I'm very happy with. You know, I don't need a third one tarnishing that. I just made the tweet because in the like publishing timeline of things, we just published Octopussy, and I'm like, I hate that back at the end of The Spy Who Loved Me, I was like, yeah, maybe I like Roger Moore better than any of this stuff.
When you said that, I was just like, I just wish,
because because he just falls completely off a cliff, for the next 4 movies. So like I appreciate that Timothy Dalton didn't suffer from that, and I can go on and enjoy Timothy Dalton in things like Chuck, or in things like Hot Fuzz, or in Doctor Who. And he's just going to have a great continued career, not be tarnished by like being only thought of as a Bond actor. In a way that, you know, I think probably Roger Moore never really escapes, in a way that even today, like Pierce Brosnan, while he has obviously gone and done other things, like is probably still most iconically known for his time as Bond. And even Daniel Craig is trying to like break out of that by doing things like Logan Lucky and Knives Out and stuff like that. And I think he will be able to, but it's like if Timothy Dalton had stayed in this role, you know, a lot longer, it would have been like, that's going to be the thing that defines his career. And I appreciate that he got to, you know, play around with a little bit more variety outside of this. I do love that his IMDb is still, though, him as Bond, his IMDb like profile picture. So
I mean, like it's always gonna be the biggest thing someone does, obviously, when you're James Bond. But I do think that because he was Bond for such a brief period of time, right? His entire Bond run is over a 2-year stretch, right, of 2 movies. That I think he probably is most successful in being Bond and also having a career totally removed outside of that, right? Whereas I think really he also is lucky because by the time of Pierce Brosnan, I think that like pop culture media reporting and criticism became like more and more of like in its own industry, and so like he just became so tied to that character, and Daniel Craig I think in a lot of ways did too. Right, and then you have Roger Moore never even cared to do anything else, right? Like I didn't include it in the trivia for when we left his era, but like after A View to a Kill, Roger Moore wouldn't even act in another movie for 5 years. He just basically retired for like 5 years after A View to a Kill and just took that much time off. So in some ways, I think Dalton was probably the most successful with, maybe, you know, you could argue Sean Connery also obviously won an Oscar after being Bond, but like he's always tied, I think, to like that is James Bond for so many people because he obviously created the character on film. And Timothy Dalton was able to kind of escape and do other weird kind of quirky things, have fun villainous turns other places. I think he's such a delight, right? Like this was for me sort of the most blank spot era in a lot of ways, right? Like I've obviously seen all of these movies many times, but I've you know probably watched Timothy Dalton Bond movies among the fewest, along with like some of the latter half of Roger Moore's era. And so it was a thing of like, yeah, it's been probably like 5-6 years since I've seen a Timothy Dalton movie because those aren't the ones I put on that much. And so it was a delight to be like, oh, like I like him so much, right? Like he is a character and as an actor are among the things that most surprised me in a good way from doing this series, right? Like in a similar vein of like, oh, I really loved Goldfinger. Like I really love that movie now. I like really love Timothy Dalton's interpretation of the character, right? And I think the criticisms of him being like bland or boring are totally unfounded now, even as someone who kind of thought that at one point in my life, like I think it's totally, not a valid criticism at all. I think he could deliver such a great, grounded, gritty, dark, but also still charming performance as Bond, especially in Living Daylights. I think he's really charming and really fun. That yeah, like I think, ultimately he's going to be my second favorite Bond we've gone through so far, just because of, I think, obviously my own childhood kind of love of the Connery era Bond and what that Bond did in terms of making me fall in love with the series. But I think he's great. I think he kind of joins that lineage of Connery, Dalton, and in the future Craig as like the three more serious Bond performances and actors. And I think it is so obvious to see why Daniel Craig said for basically 15 years he pulled so much from Timothy Dalton and Sean Connery, and it is very obvious. I think Dalton in particular, like there are a lot of seeds that at the time were not well received. Like he was in some ways was doing Daniel Craig Bond just like 20 years too early and kind of got crucified for it a little bit.
I mean, yeah, he's very much the, like, he is way ahead of his time in terms of like the gritty reboot of a character.
Yeah.
Like even like this movie coming out the same year as Batman is something, because like Batman, obviously a very gritty, dark reboot of what largely
West,
people thought of or would think of as Batman. But then even like, now as we're, on the heels of the Batman, we've had two even darker and grittier reboots of that character over the years.
Arguably three if you count Dark Knight, Ben Affleck's take, and now the Batman.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I think it's just like in terms of like the pop culture trends and movie trends, just ahead of his time. And like or he just came along at the wrong time for the movies that he was making for the, for when your competition is Lethal Weapon 2 and what were some of the other ones you had out there? Indiana Jones,
Batman, right, all this stuff.
Yeah, like Batman is thematically probably the closest because of that darkness to him. But like so much of the other stuff was like, this is like summer movies, blockbuster, buddy cop. You'll never believe what Mel Gibson and Danny Glover get up to in this one. Like, and this was, no, Bond is on a mission for revenge. I think it's I think that would be a very hard sell to get audiences on board with both of those things in 1989.
Yeah.
So
it's a shame too, right? Because, he was just so ahead of the time, I think, and it's hard to rehabilitate those images 2 decades later. I think when it comes kind of more in vogue, he's also just has the, I think, misfortune of being Bond for so short that is great in terms of like his quality, but bad in terms of like he's just sandwiched between two larger, more kind of era defining Bonds. But he's great, I think, and I think his 2 movies are great. I think it's such a fun performance, and the juxtaposition between him and Roger Moore is so. I think Roger Moore is totally fine as Bond, and I know lots of people who like Roger Moore as James Bond, and I know people who probably listen to the show and like Roger Moore as James Bond. That's fair, but I think I can't imagine people, even if you like Roger Moore as James Bond, you can't also recognize the fact that like his movies just fell off a cliff, right? And what I've talked about before, if you read any of my reviews for Roger Moore movies from like The Spy Who Loved Me onwards, it's just me saying he threads such a fine line between being like this kind of like cool, like diffident, like charming Bond who's kind of like, who's so cool and like doesn't care and like, devil may care attitude kind of thing, and just like being bored and indifferent and blasé and like all this kind of stuff. And I think so much of Roger Moore's last 4 movies are that. And so it is also just exciting and engaging to see a Bond who does actually care. And I think that is Timothy Dalton to a T. I think he really utilized his like Shakespearean training to like really bring something new to the character.
I think he also benefits from getting out before he ages out of the character.
Yeah.
I think that's,
he did 2 and then was done.
A super benefit compared to, again, like, Roger Moore going for so long, like you talking about, Connery will always be identified as Bond. Yeah, because if you include Never Say Never Again, he played Bond over 21 years. um,
Mm.
so that's a significant chunk of his career
I mean,
is going to be tied to that character, even though obviously it
even
wasn't throughout
yeah,
consistently or whatever. But it's still like the from when he started to when he finally put that character away, there was a lot of time.
even if you don't, right? Like even if you just view it through his like canonical Bond appearances, the argument is still the same. Of, like even Connery aged out, and he was only 41, just because of like how much he aged by the time he comes back for Diamonds Are Forever. Like he looks much older, right? Like he even he sort of aged out in his own way, and Timothy Dalton, I would say, is one of the ones who was kind of lucky to just kind of leave. Before that, I think Pierce Brosnan also left before he was like aged out. And Daniel Craig is sort of like the interesting middle ground where like he maybe could have aged out if they tried to play him like the same 30-year-old character, but the fact they allowed him to be someone who aged naturally in the role, something they didn't afford the opportunity. Because like I think a James Bond who's in his 50s can work.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it doesn't work when they do it for Roger Moore, who, yeah, like he's 55, 56, 57 years old, but they're trying to act like he's still 35 years old. And that is the part that doesn't work. And that is the element of those movies, I think, that fails Roger Moore, that he couldn't control, right? It's like, yeah, like if they had given him a better script to work with, like they did for Daniel Craig, like you can do a really cool, engaging, older James Bond story. We've seen it done. And so I also think, you know, Timothy Dalton escaped that and having to worry about it. And Roger Moore, unfortunately, didn't.
Yeah, I think the fact that the Daniel Craig era is going to lean so much into the fact of how old Bond is and
Yeah.
what the job is doing, how it's taking its toll on his body, and how he
Mm-hmm.
can't do the things he did when he was a younger agent and stuff.
Yeah.
I think prevents him from aging out of the
Yeah.
role.
I agree.
Because the movie supports that. Yes, he is an older Bond, and you know, and yeah, it's not trying to pretend otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. That is the show then. Thank you for watching. If you like what you saw, you can go over to youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where you should already be for this YouTube-only series. And make sure to like and subscribe to the video. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, letting us know what you thought about License to Kill. And then ring the little bell notification to get notified each time a new video goes live, Monday through Saturday, over at thatnerdysite.com and also That Nerdy Site on the YouTube page. You can also go over to thatnerdysite.com and find all the latest reviews, features, podcasts, and written pieces going live over there Monday through Saturday. In addition, obviously, to all of the companion written review pieces that I do for the That Bond Show series. Go check out all of those thoughts as well. Otherwise, you can go find Trevor J. Starkey at Trevor J. Starkey on the internet. Trev, anything that you want to plug or shout out?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to, if you're watching this when it's going live, we are probably in the midst of our Pixar month on That D Plus show. So you can go catch us talking about kind of Pixar movies, old and new, including projects like Turning Red, Luca, A Bug's Life, and Monsters, Inc. So go check that out on That D Plus show here in April.
Agreed. Go do it. It is going to be good stuff. Lots of fun. You can go find me at LeftyLogie, at LeftyLoggy, Loggy, on the internet. I will echo Trevor's shout out on That D Plus show. A lot of fun stuff happening over there for the Pixar themed month where we've already embarked on by the time you listen to this. I will also give a shout out to the somewhat recent episodes of That News You Care About, where we just recently celebrated our 100th anniversary of that 100th episode anniversary of that show. I should say, a couple weeks ago, by the time you listen to this, probably, where me and myself and Trevor kind of went through, and the episodes preceding that, our favorite video game characters, favorite kind of consoles, and favorite games of all time list. So go check out all those special episodes over there. Otherwise, you can go find That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site all across the internet. For myself, for Trevor, for all of us here at That Bond Show, thank you for watching, and we will return with Goldeneye.